Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. My name is HarveyBracken-Smith, and today I'm honored to be joined by Seth Yakatan. Seth is the co-founder of Katan Associates International. He's raised more than $1 billion and sold over 22 businesses. He also has 38,000 followers on LinkedIn. Seth, I'm incredibly excited to chat to you today. I wanted to get started by asking you, how did you get into entrepreneurship?
Wow, Harvey, I think we should talk about your criteria for having guests because the world's best is certainly not with me, but that's okay. Honestly, from the moment that I was born, I was into it. I had a great role model and partner for a long time in my father, who grew up in an orphanage and became a pretty successful serial entrepreneur himself. So, I honestly had my first job at 9 years old, and I don't think I've ever had less than two jobs. So, working was just kind of genetically encoded in me. And I think working for myself, although I have worked for institutions, I think working for myself was something that I always knew I was just going to have to do.
Did you always have this perspective that you'd achieve such heights of success, though? Because I think for many, particularly young entrepreneurs, they look at films like The Social Network, obviously that being the founding of Facebook, now Meta, in which people are receiving billions, even building $1 trillion company. Did you always think of entrepreneurship as kind of this outsized thing, or was it just a means to get by and it kind of evolved into something great?
That's a great question. First of all, to be honest with you, with all the superlatives and accolades and the accretion of the numbers sound great. I turned 55 a couple days ago, and I honestly don't really feel like I've almost achieved anything at this point. So thank you, but I think it's just what you did last. How did you do on your last one, and what did that do is kind of how I look at it. For me, honestly, it might be wired a little bit different than anyone. For me, money and the amassing or the collection of wealth, for lack of a better description, isn't about power. It's not about things. It's just about freedom. It's about the freedom to be able to do what I want to do on my own terms. So for me, it was just more about the freedom via the achievement, as opposed to like, I need another building, or I need another car, or I need another thing. So I don't know. I think my experiences or my orientation and motivation is a little bit different in that regards.
Well, you mentioned that approaching 55, you feel like you haven't achieved anything, but yet your primary goal was to achieve freedom. So what does freedom look like to you, and how has that evolved from when you started to where you are now?
When I started, honestly, I guess I kind of had two real fundamental theses or beliefs. I kind of thought that success was a meritocracy, that if you worked harder or you were smarter than someone else, you would do better. And through 35 years, I've realized that's not true. Most of the people who are supremely wealthy aren't that much smarter or work harder than anybody else. They're either just born into it or they're luckier, right? So, like, I always kind of believed I'm going to work harder and I'm going to do better. That kind of fell apart. And, for me, in the first, kind of 15 or 20 years of my career, I was really involved in early stage venture rounds and venture companies, and I kind of thought that I was going to be able to put one of those together and take it public or sell it, and clip off 10 or 15% of that for myself and just ride off into the sunset. And that's not how it works. So as I've gotten older, I think I've just looked at perspective and what I want to achieve in a different way than that. Going into it, those were kind of the two things that I believed, and I've either come to believe they're not true or it's just not as easy as I thought it was.
The perspective on what it takes to come into wealth seems pretty deterministic in that you're either born into it or you're lucky. Do you think that there's a third angle for those that work really hard? Like what changed in your mind from thinking that success is pretty meritocratic to it not being that?
As a young person, being around people that had raised a bunch of money or had been in funds, I thought that they were these super beings, somebody who, like when I was 12, meeting somebody who went to Harvard, I thought that they were some, robot like C3PO, and I could never achieve that. And when you meet them, I'm like, this guy isn't that much smarter than me. Like, he can't, like, put the two of us on a street corner in Watts, and who's going to come out alive? I am. right? So something about like the law of the jungle, that I thought was going to work on Wall Street didn't. Look, I think if you're smart and you're success and you work hard, you're probably going to have a decent outcome. But, if everyone who's an entrepreneur is looking for a unicorn, there just aren't a lot of unicorns. Let's just look at two examples, and I'm not going to throw shade, but let's just look at Facebook. Okay. Like, there were a lot of things that were just like Facebook that didn't turn into Meta. And if you look at the genesis of that, and I'm not again throwing shade, that wasn't his idea, right? He stole that idea and he paid someone for it. So if we look back and okay, he's worth whatever, 40 billion or 100 billion dollars. If I told you like, hey, Harvey, we're going to start something in our dorm room, and I'm going to steal it from you, and it's going to become the most interesting internet platform ever in 30 years, and I'm going to be worth $100 billion. Would you believe that?
Probably not, no.
Okay, let's look at something else. I look at a lot of industries. There's a company called Beatbox that just got bought by Anheuser-Busch. It's basically like really cool pre-made liquor in a box. There's 70 things like that. So why does that one get purchased and the other 14 others don't? I don't know. There's not the other 13 or 14 others that are like Beatbox work just as hard or just as smart, raise as much money. I guess to your point, what I thought was that I'm going to outwork you and I'm going to out hustle you and I'm going to outgrind you and I'm going to out weekend you and I'm going to 80-hour a week you and I'm going to push and I'm going to force this to get done. Sometimes the harder I forced a transaction, the less it got done. Think about it, so sometimes after 35 or 40 years of that, I kind of sit back and I'm like, if I'm just kind of allowing it to occur, maybe it's a different outcome. I definitely think there's a third there. It's not always hustle bro, finance bro, tech bro, hustle culture, outwork you that's going to win, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if I go on your LinkedIn profile and read your description, it's very like bold, it's very like exciting, it's very like, come work with me. I've sold 22 companies, I've raised $1 billion. But then speaking to you now, you're giving a very human response to say it's actually not as easy as, it says on as the writing on the tin can. So do you think that the majority of people that listen to this podcast that have ambitions of building a big company, do you think that they should still pursue that pursuit, or that it's not even worth doing?
Absolutely pursue it. So there's two things, maybe three things, right? The first thing is that if it's work, it's the wrong thing. Like if you believe in it and you're committed and you want to do it, follow your passion, whether that's playing the flute or digging a ditch or fixing cars or trying to create a unicorn company, right? Number one, just do it. Number two, the only way that I've learned lessons is by failing and failing really hard. I think in the entrepreneurial journey, we could probably come up and you probably track, 8 founders that are 30 under 30 that came up with a widget in their dorm room and sold it for $1 billion. And there's 6 guys like that. And for every person like that, there's 8,000 that failed. I think part of the journey is that you have to fail. Like I failed really badly 2 or 3 times this year, like badly, really badly. Part of that is, I think, the process, and you just never know, right? You never know. Like I have this policy where I talk to everybody. I take every meeting. Why? Because I just don't know what's going to come next. I've pace. So yeah, I think you have to try. I'm not saying give up, right? But just understand how hard it is in every industry. AI, software, biotech, life sciences, therapeutic drug development, wellness, CPG, beverage, alcohol, cannabis. It's all hard at that stage. And the differentiator of what, like if there's a horse race and those guys are rounding the final turn, I got like an 80% prediction ratio of who's going to win the race. Right? When they go around the first turn, I don't know, like, okay, flip it, right? Like, so I think it's just hard to differentiate at a certain stage, but I don't want to dissuade anybody.
Yeah, I really think it's a tough way of thinking about it, because I think despite the conditions of the world we live in, as you mentioned, both regard with people being born into wealth or being incredibly lucky, or that third option, being like a unicorn, both in terms of building $1 billion company, but also just in terms of how rare it is to achieve such an extraordinary thing because there are so many people that have failed. I think it begs the question of, is the pursuit worth doing regardless? I've actually had a few actors on my podcast, one being a lady by the name of Sinetra Sarkar from the UK, another one being Tom McInerney, who's also from the UK, Game of Thrones, and he was also in a show called Blackadder. And both of them, in their own ways, said something similar in that you don't become an actor to be on Hollywood and earn millions of dollars. You do acting because you love acting. And I think there's kind of a parallel thing that can be pointed towards what you're saying here, which is the odds are so low that if you want to chase this pursuit, you've got to love what you're doing.
That's the first thing that I said, right? You got to love it, right? Look, the trick for me is I don't consider what I do work. I talk on the phone all friggin' day and I make spreadsheets, right? Like, I grew up with people that were like auto mechanics and plumbers and bricklayers and worked in chop shops. That's work, right? Like that's work. My hand, I don't have calluses on my hands, My body doesn't ache after a day, maybe because I didn't like do my standing desk thing, but like, I think you got to love it. That's got to be the first thing. If it's work, once it becomes work, it's an issue. Look, that's why I got out of institutional investing. I was on the institutional investor track for probably like 14 years of my life, and it just kind of ate my soul. Couldn't do it. It became less about the project and less about the people and less about the industry and more about the politics of the group that you were working for. And it was like, I didn't get into this for this. Like, I got into this to like, have fun and do good stuff. And so, I think if you're doing it just for the exit, maybe that's not the right reason. Also, I think it depends upon why'd you start the company. So like the other thing that we didn't get into in terms of your factors of success, there's a whole show that you could do just called Right Place, Right Thing, Right Time. Right place, right thing, right time. You look at what happened in the 80s with Dell and Cuban and all the people around Microsoft, and we could probably make 6 or 7 more. You know what that was, man? That was right place, right thing, right time, right? Like right place, right thing, right time. Is that going to happen again? Yeah, probably in other areas. You also look at people that have done it multiple times. I'm not a huge Musk fan, right, personally as a human being, but if you look at what he's done, he's been able to kind of replicate that model several times in several different things. So I also think outside of those three, right place, right thing, right time, you cannot prognosticate, and that's a huge kind of escalator for success. And just the person, right? The person, I think, has a big thing to do with it.
Yeah, when I speak to many people that have already found great levels of success, a lot of people look inwards with regard to how does their job relate to their personal life, their future goals, what they like doing now. And I think that we all have, even myself in the position that I'm in, I wouldn't use the word privilege, but I would use the word of like, we're enabled to be able to make decisions, to have the choice of what we want to do because of what we've done that have led us up to this point. So you mentioned a few minutes ago that you don't have calluses on your hands. So any form of hard work that you do is nothing like the hard work that many of your peers would go through when they're younger. But with that being said, there is an element that if you want to achieve great levels of success, you have to do the hard yards in some capacity. Do you think you would be able to achieve the same level of success that you have and what you're doing now without having the credentials of the industry? Or do you think that there's another route you can achieve or go down without getting the credentials from the industry and getting it elsewhere?
I think it's is there the easy, it's just going to happen path? Sure, right? Like we could come up with 5 or 6 outliers like that. But I think understanding the dynamics of an industry and building credibility and a reputation and really, spending the time to understand the quantitative economics of who's involved and where money is flowing and who's there and understanding what the deals that have occurred look like, I think gives you a unique competitive advantage. And I think that's invaluable. It's, when I got out of grad school, I went to work for a bank that was managing a huge LBO fund, and we funded 17 different industries. So, the first 4 months of that job, I needed to learn the metrics of like 17 industries or I was just useless. So like I printed out every analyst report and research report I could, and I read them on the beach on the weekends, and understand who's there and what are they doing and what are the metrics and what are we looking at, what are what are the KPIs and who's funding and understanding that landscape. It's kind of like what I think the building blocks. And then you said something, the person that I play on LinkedIn may or may not be the person that I play in real life. And that's true, right? So I'm much more holistic and probably a little bit more pragmatic than I am on LinkedIn, just because I think that that's the evolution of wisdom a little bit. That whole concept of forcing versus allowing, or hustle culture versus, not. Once you get to a certain point, it's about getting things done and helping people to achieve things and helping people like you to learn how to get things done than it is about the thing anymore, right? So, and that's that's got to be part of the process too.
I think we'll go on to LinkedIn in a minute, but something I'm very passionate about is the idea of how can I leverage my networking capabilities so that it's not just one to one, but one to 1,000. And that's kind of one of the benefits of LinkedIn, which we can go on to. But more so from the point that growing up, I came from a little island in Jersey where, not many people knew who I was. And then I went to a very good high school, I'm at a good university, and I got a good internship next summer. And it's kind of gone from a point where one to one, each time that I speak to someone, they either come away from that conversation thinking, oh, he's a smart guy, or they don't. But I would bet that most times, because I think I can offer value to that conversation, that hopefully people will go away from it thinking, oh, Harvey's a great guy. I would want to work with him in some XYZ capacity in the future. Coming into the real world is that we only have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, and 52 weeks a year. So you don't have the capacity to speak to every single person who might want to do business with you, who hears about you, that might want to work with one of your companies over time. So you build that leverage. So social media could be your answer, but is there anything else that you think, or including social media, that you think people can do to credentialize themselves outside of simply going to institutions?
I do. Figure out a way to speak at industry conferences that are relevant to your, right? If we go through oil and gas or financial services or private wealth management, or name the industry, there's probably a suite of conferences that people go to for that industry, right? Trade shows. Figure out a way to become a speaker at a trade show. It's instant credibility. It's an instant platform for you. It's an instant networking. It's one of the things, it's one of the most important lessons that I learned from my dad. My dad would speak at all these things, and once you get off stage, there's a line of people that want to talk to you, and it's a calling card, and it's credibility. So that's definitely one thing you can do as a young person. That might be harder. I don't know you real well, but I have a generational bias, which is people of your generation, to be candid, just seem to be lazy and entitled and don't want to work. You don't seem to be lazy or entitled or don't want to work. You seem to be a go-getter and not entitled and working your ass off. So I also think, if a younger person goes to someone who's, allegedly extremely accomplished and says, be my mentor, or can I do a project for you, or help me, and I'm not expecting much, or you're not expecting compensation for that, that can also be a great, trial. Anyone who approaches me from that perspective, I'm usually going to give some time to. So that could also be a methodology to do that.
I really like your focus on trade shows and conferences, and that's not really something that I'd thought of before, to be honest. And the other thing that I would mention is the degree of working for people without earning money. And the reason I think that's an important thing is I think in today's day and age, there are a lot of people that can't afford to not work without earning money. And for people like that, perhaps there have to be different circumstances, perhaps a stipend to be able to live and travel to work and get basic necessities. But for a lot of people that perhaps doing some part-time work alongside school, or doing a little project in the summer when they have time, what it shows by working for someone for free is it's not actually about the minimum wage salary or close to minimum wage salary that you'd probably earn in dollar amounts that you'd get. It's actually in the amount of value that you can show or offer to that person without expecting anything in return. Goes from I'm not worth $20 an hour, whatever it means. You are actually invaluable because you can help with fundraising, you can help with networking, you can help even whether it means just getting the coffees. By providing value to that person, it shows traits as trust, networking, that you can do things, and then that person will then trust you to do a lot more. And I think that's an essence that's been lost a lot.
Well, again, if you give something to someone without any expectation of anything in return, I think that's the greatest gift that you can do as a human being. If you do that in a business setting, you don't know how great that's going to germinate, because if you did an internship for a family office for a summer for free and they love you, they might offer you a job. They might offer you a job at one of their portfolio companies. They might introduce you to someone who gives you a job, right? You don't know what's going to happen there. Let's go back to the trade show. If you look at any industry vertical that you're in, usually what you either want to do is you want to find the leaders in the companies in that vertical, or you want to find the big investors in the vertical, right? I might be missing one more thing, like maybe the service providers, I don't know. But usually you're looking for the companies and the investors. I bet you if we did something where we pulled any industry at random and you gave me a week, I could come back and say, this is the one trade show I would attend. And you would say, why? And I would say, because look at all of the leaders from all of these companies that are going to be there. And there is nothing, and I mean nothing in humanity, that replicates face-to-face in real life interaction. So part of the reason that I like going to these meetings, okay, is because I can get in front of decision makers from each of the verticals and the circles that I'm looking for, because usually they're all there. And depending upon how deep or penetrated your industry is, you might get the CEO of a company in a one-on-one basis if you're really creative and you think about it, because if you know that person's speaking, you can come up to them right off stage and say, here's my business card. So for me, it's about optimizing your target acquisition at those above anything else. And if you're also up here with them because you're speaking, they're like, oh, what is this kid Harvey doing up here? Like, okay, I got to meet this guy. Or they hear something that you say and they're like, oh, this person's intelligent. I want to talk to them. So for me, it's a compounding effect at those events. Because what I'll do is I'll put together, a target list. Hey, here's everybody who's coming, and let's make sure we get a meeting with them.
I think on a even bigger level than that, that's actually a strategy that many of the Middle Eastern countries pursue. I think when they initially started getting involved in sports, whether that be getting Ronaldo to play in Saudi Arabia or starting to get live golf and all of the other things that they do with regard to sports washing or greenwashing or, however you want to mention it, one of the most amazing things that they've been able to do, despite spending unbelievably large amounts of money on these players, on these sports teams, etc., is that they're actually paying for both access and attention. And so it takes it from the place that you spend $1 billion on a player. Well, if they have an economy that's several billions more, that actually enables them to be at the forefront of the people, in the minds of people in the UK, in the US, of business leaders who then think, Ronaldo's now in Saudi Arabia, perhaps we need to have a presence there as well. We are experts in renewable energies. Perhaps Saudi Arabia would like that as well. Where for the other, 180 countries on the planet that aren't top of mind, it's actually a lot harder to get that access. And it's when you have the access, that's when opportunities arise that you wouldn't previously have thought of.
That, man, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Listen, we could do another show about the analogies between business and, amorous relationships between humans. When it's too hard, it's too hard. When it's easy, it just happens. It just kind of, right? But if you keep, it's too hard, man. So it just flows, and that's the biggest thing that I've found in the past 35 years. I can tell when it's gonna flow, and if I push, it goes back, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like dating.
So you already achieve success. You go from
allegedly
alleged success, and then you go independent. But yet you start posting on LinkedIn. What was the idea in theory for that, and how has that come out for you? What has that done for you in reality?
Well, we could spend the rest of the day talking about this. Full transparency, what I wanted to do is I wanted to figure out how to monetize an audience. In 17, 18, 19, I got involved in a couple of people that were servicing huge DTC marketing companies. I saw what the DTC, direct-to-consumer marketing world looked like in a bunch of different product sets, and I was like, God, going back to where we started, like none of these people are really that intelligent. They just know how to like sell stuff to people on the internet, and the stuff isn't that good. And I was kind of like, I think I have a lot of value to add in terms of raising capital and entrepreneurship and, leadership dynamics and M&A. And I have 20,000 followers. And I saw people like Justin Welch and Matt Gray who were selling all these products. And, with no disrespect, I was like, these guys haven't done anything, right? Like they haven't done a thing, but they're proselytizing from the pulpit of entrepreneurship. And I was like, I should do that. And that's how it started. And it's turned into something completely different now. In one of the verticals that I'm in, it's a double-edged sword, man. It's been a great experience. And it's won me a lot of nice compliments and, a couple of income streams. And it's also been a really bad experience at some level because there's just when you put yourself out there, there's people who just don't like it. And there's people who don't like you. And there's people who become jealous of you. And if you are as strong of a voice as I am, there are people who are threatened by what you say and will threaten to sue you for what you say. It's been interesting, that's for sure. I didn't set out to become a LinkedIn influencer. The fact that a 55-year-old guy in LA is influencing anything is kind of scary to me. But it's been good. For me, it's been intellectually therapeutic. I just get to kind of say what comes out of my mind. But it's been a very, very interesting experience. And the intention of where I started and where it's at now is just completely different.
So you've kind of talked about the beginning and you've talked about the end, but take me on the journey. So you come up with the idea to LinkedIn. You've already started the journey midway in the journey at 20,000 followers. I think you're on like 38,000 now. We can go to 20,000, but talk to me a little bit about the opportunities that have arisen because of it. Some of the things that you wouldn't have foreseen unless you were actually doing it in the arena.
So the journey was simple. I was on a podcast with somebody like you, and I was like, hey, if you could figure out how to make money with me on LinkedIn, I'd love it. And, that person came back to me and was like, hey, I think what you're saying is kind of important, and I'm just going to like take the audio clips and post them. I started to get traction. I found a kid who, this is back in probably 2022 or 23, I can't even remember, said, hey, you need to do carousels. And I hired him to do like 8 carousels, and it was a couple $100. And like by the 4th carousel, I was like, you're not really doing any better than I did. Like, should we continue this? And I think the 5th carousel did, I don't even remember, like 2.5 million impressions and just blew up. And I was like, okay, we got something. And honestly, at that point, I spent a lot of time in the broader LinkedIn creator universe, paying people for a power hour and talking to a lot of people. So Matt Barker, Jazz Alec, Laura Acosta, Luke Matthews, Richard Vanderblom. I'm probably missing several, Ryan Musselman, Luke Shalom, Nat Berman. I talked to a lot of the Dr. Caroline Frost. I talked to a lot of these people kind of saying like, how do you do this? And paying them for their time. So like during 2023 and into 2024, I probably invested, I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000 in paying people for their thoughts and developed a system, and was really kind of torn between, should I lean into cannabis as my content pillar, or should I stay with like entrepreneurship? And cannabis is still federally illegal in the United States. And in May of 2024, I had my banking taken away from me by a U.S. regulated federal institution, and I had to go to kind of a cannabis bank. And when that happened, I just said, I'm leaning into cannabis, and I did. And so I kind of went like this, and then I went like that. So once I started leaning into cannabis exclusively, which is kind of what I do from a content perspective with some variation, I saw kind of an exponential growth in what I do. And, for all the negative stuff, I have a lot of people that I'm able to empower through the platform. I have a lot of people that I've been able to mentor through the platform. So, if in any given day I'm dealing with 300 or 400 people on LinkedIn, I would say that, 50 of them love me and 4 of them think I'm the devil. And you just have to kind of get into that and not let it kind of worry you or wear on you, and just, kind of be yourself. So that's kind of what I've done. It's opened up a lot of doors. It's opened up a lot of content creation doors. It's opened up some paid advertising doors for me. I'm hopeful that this year I can launch some products off of it. It's definitely made me a high-level guest at most industry events and trade shows, which has been good just because the power of the platform that I have is almost stronger than anyone else's. So that's been good. So I don't know. It's been an interesting experience, that's for sure.
I think one of the great benefits of having a podcast, and is something that not a lot of people know about. It's obvious, but not unless you see it. Is that I can speak to great people, ask them whatever I like, and get their knowledge, and hopefully give back to them in some way. So I'm not going to be spending $15,000 to $20,000, but I am going to ask you what was the biggest and best piece of advice you got from speaking to all those people that my listeners can apply with regard to LinkedIn.
Not to besmirch anybody, it's probably kind of two different things. The Jazz Alec, Laura Acosta, Matt Barker, Luke Matthews world of people are copywriters. And I think LinkedIn is fundamentally a copywriting platform, and understanding the hook methodology and how to write a post is the first thing you need to do. So that kind of school of thought, I think, is really important. The second, I think, is Richard Vanderblom, who's the algorithm expert. And, he kind of told me, look, you need to come up with one content pillar. Think about it like eating at a restaurant. You need to have a main course and two side dishes. And a lot of people, it takes a while to figure out what that main course is. But once I found my main course, it was perfect. So I think those kind of two themes, just, figure out a hook and a style, and figure out what your content pillar is, and stick to it for a while. Probably a third, which is just me, and just do it. Right? Like, it's a lot of work, right? Like, it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of different things that you can do, from posting every day to commenting every day to blah, 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 to DMing to the whole, there's a methodology. But I do think that if you are consistent and you stick to it and you figure out what your content pillar is, you will find success on the platform without a doubt.
Why do you think that when you found that content pillar that you achieved such astronomical success?
I don't know that it's astronomical success, Harvey. However, thank you. I think it had to do with the way that I approach it. And let me tell you what I mean. Most people on LinkedIn are trying to sell you something overtly. Blah, 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 and here's my system. Blah, 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 and here's my offer. Blah, 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 and here's my list. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm trying to sell my authority and my knowledge. So I think the first thing is that, great, if you call me, maybe you can hire me, but I'm not on there for lead gen. Right? I'm on there for authority. So that's one differentiation. The second differentiation is everything that I do on the platform is constructed around this thesis. I want to do one post a day, and I want the maximum velocity on that post in a 24-hour period. That's it. That's the whole thing, right? So the way that I construct my content is based upon that. You will see me do it. I will very rarely repost anything. I will very rarely interrupt the 24-hour flow of one of my posts. Maybe I will because I forgot to do something. But the two things that I think have caused me to go stronger is that, I'm not really selling anything other than my opinion and knowledge on decloaking what I think is going on in a vertical. And everything that I'm doing is deliberately focused on that velocity of my post in a 24-hour period, because after that it just really doesn't matter.
Why do you focus on just one a day versus doing multiple? Does it negatively impact the algorithm?
I believe it limits your reach. I've tried everything, dude. I've tried. If you've thought about it, I've tried it. So I just think if you're using any of the plugins or any of the add-ins or any of the metric-based software, if you want consistency in terms of measuring, the only way you're going to get that consistency is having a consistent measuring period. So if you do 2 posts a day, well, okay, you're going to have a 12-hour period, and you're going to have to do that for months to figure out what your data looks like. So for me, it's just one post, one day, 24 hours, post it the next day. If you follow me, I'm posting at 7:30 a.m. Pacific every day. And if you missed me yesterday, you can catch me today.
How do you maximize the velocity?
I have done a lot of work to create people that either look for my content or are going to comment. I have been accused, numerous times of cheating. And, if I was going to cheat, my numbers could be 10 or 15 times what they are through services or systems or whatever. Like, I can't help it if 80 fucking people in India think I'm important to talk about because it enhances their view because I have 38,000 followers. You get to a point in the cycle where kind of no matter what you do, you're going to get bots. And I just kind of look at it as more comments. I also think I probably have 50 or 100 religious commenters, either because of the larger creator people that I've commented on for years, right? Or just because of my network in the sector that I'm in.
So with regard
But let me finish. To that point, the velocity was intentional, right? The velocity was me looking at Matt Gray and Justin Welch and saying, how the heck does this guy get 70 reposts in 8 minutes? How does that work? It's not normal. Like that's not normal behavior. No one's sitting there reposting. So I spent like 6 months going into the deep dark underbelly of all of that to figure out how it worked. And there's a couple different ways it works. So like the velocity was intentional for sure.
How does it work?
Well, that's a whole different conversation.
Same conversation. Like you can give me
Harvey, I can't tell you. You know how it works? Spend a year on LinkedIn and do the work. You'll find out, right?
Give me a 30-second like top level. I don't need the specific. I don't need the secret sauce.
There's a cabal and there's systems. There's 3 or 4 people on there that if you join their system, you're just going to get velocity. We've talked about a couple of them. There's a few more. Look at people that have hundreds of reposts. And if you do the work to backlink and look at who's commenting and where they're commenting from, you can kind of trace it up to 1 or 2 people. And there's a formula there. Also, I think there's a lot of people who just spend a lot of time doing it, man.
So it's about interaction with bigger creators. You comment early, people then come to your page as well, and the algorithm also likens you to them.
Correct. So look, I'll tell you part of the work was, and I didn't mention him, but there's a guy named Nat Berman on there who's a big creator who I hired as a coach. When one of Berman's things was like, look, come up with 150 people and comment them on every day for 45 or 60 days. And I did. And I spent my own time doing that. And it was hours, dude. It was hours a day. And after that, I was like, hey, I've commented on your stuff every day for 45 or 60 days. You need to comment on me. So, if you go after 130 and you get 30% of that reciprocity, if we're gamifying comments, automatically I'm going to pick up 30 comments a day. So that's part of it. There's pods, there's systems, there's groups, there's boosting software. There's a bunch of different boosting softwares out there that you can use. There's people who will enhance performance. So there's a whole bunch of tips and tricks. And there's larger creators who, if you join their group, will boost you. But so, there's a couple different ways.
So you mentioned kind of building authority in the space, but you would have already had to get authority in terms of the actual work that you did, both in terms of fundraising, and you've done lots of different types of industries. But one of the big ones is cannabis. Could you demystify cannabis? I personally don't smoke or know that many people that smoke cannabis. So could you demystify it for people like me, I guess?
Well, it's a $32 to $35 billion industry in the United States. It's probably another 25 or 30 internationally. In the United States, it's still federally illegal. So each state has enacted or not its own regulatory system around it. And as a result of that, it's constrained. It's very hard to make money. There's not a lot of money to invest in it. It's taxed at a significantly higher rate than anything else from a consumer product perspective. And because there was, kind of a green rush that happened in 2014 to maybe 2017, 18, a ton of money has been invested and lost in the sector, and hasn't been realized. So now you're left with this industry or collection of assets that are trying to figure out what to do with a product that no one, largely seems to understand as to whether it's, the devil's weed or it's manna from heaven. So, I honestly was a pharmaceutical drug development guy for like 20 years from a capital markets perspective. And I started to look at the medicinal power of the plant. And I got into the sector really looking at it from a pharma drug development perspective. Can we create small molecules that modulate the endogenous endocannabinoid system? And I raised a bunch of money for a company and took it public and tried to do that and just failed. And somehow I made it into rec cannabis and took on a big project and got some stuff done or helped to get some stuff done there and just kept moving. And the more and more and more I got into the industry, the more and more I just saw what I thought was significant opportunity and white space from a voice perspective. So I just went after it.
It seems with both cannabis and also with fundraising, they're somewhat restricted. Cannabis being a regulatory thing in terms of both limiting the states that's available in, but also in the level of taxation that inhibits growth, but also fundraising on that regard. But then fundraising, similarly, you mentioned at the start of the conversation that we're having, that it actually can be quite hard to get a deal down, and sometimes you kind of just got to go with the flow for it to enable it to happen. So, with that being said, with these things that can make it sound like very restrictive industries, how do you go about developing an edge and have your unique perspective to offer value to businesses with these two separate things, despite the restrictive nature of them?
That's a really tough one. You have to just understand the constraints that you're bound by and understand what's achievable. I think one thing that I've been really good at from a capital markets perspective in all the industries that I've been involved with is getting enough information to kind of know where the deal zone is, right? If you're raising money, what are the valuations that other people have raised money at? If you're public, what are the metrics that look at it? If you're doing buy or sell side M&A, what are the values that have occurred to kind of create, for lack of a better description, a kind of a football field, matrix of where values sit. So, I think for me, specifically in cannabis, it's kind of understanding what that zone looks like. There's capital, there's not a lot. Here's where it's going to be, and here's where it's going to be priced. If you have a thing, does it fit in that zone? For me, it's pretty easy, given my alleged extreme knowledge of the vertical, to be able to say, well, you're in the box or you're not in the box. If you're in the box, then it's a lot easier. Depending upon how far outside of the box you are, it becomes more difficult. And that's usually kind of the first pass for me. Also, anything that's really kind of early stage in any vertical it's just really hard. If you don't have revenue, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you're selling gold at a discount. It's hard. So as I've gotten older or as I've gotten more developed, I tend to look at things that are at least generating revenue, and for me, things that have more scale, as I've gotten, deeper, have just been easier for me. Size opens eyes. If you go to somebody with $1 million financing, it's hard. If you go to somebody with $100 million financing, I don't want to say it's easier, but like your universe of end users is much larger.
How do you go about, aside from the amount of check, how do you look at criteria for the types of businesses that you work in? And kind of the same questions before, how do you develop an edge when you look at so many different industries?
Trust but verify is the first thing. A lot of people say a lot of things. You could probably ask 6 or 7 questions to verify. If they can't verify, it's usually a pretty good sign that I'm not that interested. Forcing pressure is usually a negative indicator for me. You need to get in today because we're going to be oversubscribed. God bless you. Go with God. People are a big deal for me. Do I know the person? Do I like the person? Do I trust the person? How is the person referred to me? Are there someone who's going to listen? I do think that in many I'll probably write a book on this, in many early stage founders, I think a lot of them fall into 3 or 4 Myers-Briggs personality verticals, and a lot of them are crazy. And what I mean by that is that they when I say crazy, they try to. Their version of possible is not my version of possible. It's bigger, right? The vision is bigger. So, I think also understanding the level of crazy that I'm dealing with and how that's going to impact what's going on. I've seen it go both ways. I've seen crazy founders burn things to the ground. I've seen the same level of crazy achieve amazing things. So that's another one. I don't know. I think in terms of the competitive advantage, I don't know that you have to, is someone going to actually listen to me is an arbiter as well. You can hear what I'm saying all day long. If you're actually not going to listen, that's usually a sign that I'm just not going to be that valuable to you. At this point, again, I'm not going to say that I'm smart. I've just seen a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of things that are going to surprise me. Based upon the cadence of things, I can pretty much, with a 60 to 70% probability, prognosticate what things are going to look like or how they're going to turn out. And just using that knowledge to be able to affect outcome is probably where the differentiator is, I think. And there's plenty of people with that kind of experience.
When you say that you think that founders could fall into 3 or 4 Myers-Briggs personality types, do you think it's a necessary thing to be somewhat obsessive or crazy to build a great business?
At the entrepreneurial level, yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. Because it becomes your child. It becomes your child. You don't think Musk is still completely obsessive about how he runs his businesses? Please. Richard Branson, I don't think he's the same level of person, but like there's a level of obsession that's required and passion that I don't think you're going to have the same level of drive and passion if you're laying cement or tiling floors. It's just maybe you're an artisan and you do, but like I think you need it. I think the stakes are too high, and most of the other people that you're competing against have the same level of drive and execution need. So yeah, I definitely think you need it. It needs to be your number one thing. And everyone in your life needs to understand that, or it's not going to work.
How do you differentiate between the good obsession and the bad? Are results the only thing that can determine? So they could be the same person, but they either do well or they don't. Is that the only determining factor?
No, some of it is ethics. Are you going to step over everything to get the last nickel? Are you greedy? Are you in it for the right reasons? There's a lot of people there's several people that I've encountered in my life in this that I call the altruistic founder, meaning like I've got a great business, I've been very successful, and what I'm trying to do is Patagonia. I really don't want to exit. I really don't want to take a lot of outside capital. I want to be a nonprofit and I want to give it to my employees, kind of a thing, right? So did you set it up for the right reason? And you're a great company and you're killing it. So if you kind of clone Patagonia in a couple different industries, there's plenty of companies like that. I think that is kind of more appealing to me than I'm a Wall Street financier and I've been able to raise a lot of money and I'm going to jam a bunch of things together because that's going to be valuable to the next person that buys it from me. And I'm going to send 80% of these people home in order to maximize profit so I can sell it to the next guy. So there's some of that, I think, which differentiates for me. So yes, I think the ethos of what you're doing. There's also people that like, I started the company because my wife had cancer, or my son had cancer, or my dad had cancer, or I had a personal experience and it changed my life, or or had a problem that I couldn't solve and I wanted to create a product to do that. I think as I've gotten older, the companies that have a more altruistic meaning as opposed to just I've built it to exit seems more appealing at times.
I think it's interesting because what you just said there with regard to it being a positive force for good, that really trickles down so that that I often think that, just to go a step back, I often think that the people that I respect the most, both in terms of podcast guests, in terms of people that I meet on a day-to-day basis, whether it be in a romantic relationship, friend, family member, whatever it may be, is when I ask them a question, are they just telling me literally the answer to my question, or what are they not telling me? So a good example of that, or like a good guest, for example, is when someone was to ask me, do I have a dog? And I might just be like, yes. And that's like a meh response. But like a good response is, yeah, my dog is called Lexi. She's 4 years old. We got her in 2021. Black Labrador. She's really jumpy. But you've got to be careful on, I don't know, Saturdays because she gets like upset because of the weather. I don't know, but whatever it is, you kind of offer that extra information. And how that relates to founders and companies is that when you speak to someone that has good intentions, you'll find that in a lot of scenarios, when you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, they'll have your best intentions at heart. But when they don't, things can go wrong and you might not even know about it.
Yeah, that could be true. I think it just kind of depends on the situation. I think it just depends on the situation.
Why do you have a lean team?
Because I think I'm kind of impossible to work for.
Anything more?
Everything I do is kind of transactional. It's been hard for me to replicate myself. I worked several years ago, for till 2014 with my dad. That was a great partnership. I have a a 3-team partnership now and in one vertical that seems to be doing good. I just find it hard. I found it hard. I've just found it hard to find somebody who can move at my clock speed. And, I don't think I'm a great person to work for, quite honestly. I'm just moving too fast and in my own orbit. And I just haven't found the right.
So why would you encourage a company to work with you if you don't think you can work with yourself?
I think that's different. I think that's different. I mean, I've got plenty of people I can put on the field, and I've executed many things. And the fact that I don't have a huge team, doesn't mean that I'm not capable. I think I just like to work on 1 or 2 things at a time because it takes that much focus. And, I think it's more about the fact that I want to deliver results on a project as opposed to 11 projects. And all of these projects are hard. None. If they're easy, you're not. My last name isn't Goldman or Sachs. It's Yakatan. So, like, if you're coming to me, you got a problem, right? You're already in a hard zone. So, if my whole world has been, or my universe has been, I kind of get hard things done, then that's where I land.
What's a question that people don't ask you enough that you want to talk more about?
Gosh, what do you want to be when you grow up?
And what's your answer?
I don't know. I'm still working on it.
Why do you think that is?
Because every day is a new challenge. Life is a new challenge. What becomes important to you in your 20s and 30s may or not be important to you in your 40s and 50s. So as you get older, your priorities change and your needs change and your view changes. For a long time, it was all about me doing more and more and more and more and more. And now I'm kind of at the point where I just want to do less. I want to do less. So I also think what would be interesting is, how do you say no? How do you say no to people? And, do people understand what no is, or how you say no? I think also is something I'd love to talk about more.
How do you say no?
I usually try to be polite and just say thank you, and, like, I don't see how I can add value here. Is usually how I say no. That doesn't seem to work. People don't think that's no. So then I try to go a little bit firmer, and then that becomes too firm, and then they're offended. So that line between, like, thank you, this isn't for me, and I don't know. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of hustle and a lot of grit and seem to think that I have, like, the keys to unlock some kind of a magic kingdom, and I just don't.
Would you do it all again?
Maybe. I'd probably do a couple things differently, but
Like what?
I made a decision, to get into corporate finance, out of grad school. And the reason that I went to grad school was to really go to work on Wall Street. And I went to work for a fund afterwards. And I think, if I would have, there's a couple of decisions in my life that I could have were forks, and I chose one fork. It just might be interesting to see what happens if I chose another fork. I don't have any regrets. No regrets. Just looking back, maybe I would do things a little bit differently. It's you're only as good as your last deal, no matter what you did. So, maybe I'd like to change that part of my legacy, just to be like, he was a good person. Maybe. So
I feel like something quite unique about the world you live in is because in the point that you're getting to now, you are building authority and you're building a voice. I often ask this question to guests, and the question is, if you could put a billboard up to the world and you could deliver one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be? But what's different about what you're doing is that you're doing this on a day-to-day basis through your LinkedIn, through your posting and developing authority. So as a kind of evolution of that question, if you only had 60 seconds now and all of your LinkedIn was going to be taken away, all of your businesses, all of your reputation, everyone you've met, no one will be able to talk about you, what would you say in the next 60 seconds that you would want people to learn from you?
The world is a great place when you give something and you have no expectation of anything in return. If you can learn to utilize that lesson professionally and interpersonally, your network will exponentially grow and expand in ways that you just can't measure. That's probably it.
If I was to ask someone in 100 years' time How would you want to be described, and what would you want your legacy to be?
He was helpful and he was a good guy, and he didn't screw anybody over.
And what's next for you? And you can look at any time frame that you like.
I don't know, Harvey. I'm working on a couple things that are kind of interesting. We will see where they potentially manifest or not. And I've kind of made my bed here in the North American, United States focused cannabis sector. And I am hopeful that in the next couple of years, we get some level of federal change for that industry. If we do, I'm probably going to be pretty busy and trying to get a couple things done from a sell-side M&A perspective. And if they don't, I'm sure I'll be able to figure out a way to eat and make a living, and I will continue to do that. And at some point, I think, in 10 years from now, when I'm 65, I plan to stop working. And I'd very much like to not work and just do other things and live my life. So we'll see how that all manifests, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think there's still a great value inflection opportunity in cannabis which has not occurred, and I have put a bunch of chips on the table in order to see that to a conclusion or not.
And my final question, and I ask this to every guest on Personable, is what is one thing that you would want a listener to take away from this episode?
Do what you love and it's not work.
Seth, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. Honestly, before you came on, I expected some form of not guru, but just kind of here's the 5-step plan to become unbelievably successful. I think anyone with some form of presence online, that is usually the expectation of what they do. But from the very first question that you answered, you had a strong emphasis on what's real and what's not. I think a big falsehood in the world of social media is there are a lot of people who say they know a lot, but they don't. And there's a lot of people that know a lot, but don't share it. And so people around the world are being taught lessons that aren't actually true. Whereas I appreciate your humility. I appreciate your willingness to say, I don't know everything, but here's what I do know. I appreciate your willingness to say, here is the structure of the world and here's how I fit into it. A lot of the time you either have to be rich or get lucky. And even though there is that third bit, that is important to note. I feel like I've learned a tremendous amount, not only about fundraising, about cannabis, about LinkedIn, but what also it means to create a successful and happy life in whatever way you deem it to be. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was an honor to have you on.
My pleasure, sir. I appreciate it.